Hey guys, it's Kevin from MixCoach. On this episode of the podcast, I got to sit down with my friend Ira Glylack. And Ira is an engineer at Capitol Records. And the last couple of times I've worked in the D room, Ira has been right there by my side, making sure everything goes well. And he's just a remarkable guy, and he's done some remarkable work, although he would never really tell you about it. So I sat down with him after a session one day back in October, and we just chatted it up. And I think you'll enjoy the conversation. There's some really good insight from Ira. So without any further hesitation, this is Ira Glylack on the MixCoach podcast. So we just finished up a vocal session with a group called Taylors, and I've had a great experience the last two times I've been at Capitol Records with Ira Glylack, and I just thought he's such a cool guy that I would like to just sit and shoot the breeze with him. So Ira, tell me how you got to LA, how you got to Capitol. Tell me that whole backstory.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for the compliments, first of all. I guess it started, I'm from Washington, D.C., so I graduated high school, went to a year of college in LA, so I kind of jumped out here first because I knew I loved LA and I wanted to be out here, so I went to Occidental College in Eagle Rock for a year. But they didn't have any audio recording or anything besides like classical music, which I tried but was too boring for me. So I dropped out, moved back to DC, kind of started bands and started doing the musician thing, fell in love with recording, decided to go back to school, finished at American University in DC. They had a really nice recording program. And through the people I met in DC, I got connected with Steve Jordan, who's a famous drummer. Mm-hmm. And indirectly, he kind of introduced me to Nico Bolas, who's a great engineer out in LA. And I decided to make the move. I just did it. Came out here with no promise of any job or anything. I think I was out here for 3 months, just kind of figuring it out, settling in. I gave Nico a call, and I was like, hey, can I come shadow you or sit in on a session or just kind of, feel it out? And he's like, literally, this was probably Sunday night. He's like, starting a session in Santa Barbara tomorrow morning, Monday morning, be there 9 a.m. I live in Long Beach at this point. Mm-hmm. So if you're not familiar with the LA geography, Long Beach is probably 2.5, 3 hours away from Santa Barbara. Yeah. So I was like, screw it, whatever. I'm going to do whatever to make this happen. I left at 4 a.m. or something ridiculous to make sure I beat the traffic. And I was determined to do whatever I had to do to get up to this session in Santa Barbara with Nico. Mm-hmm. I had never met him. I had just spoken, maybe one email, one phone call. So I did. I went up there. I sat in. It was a Robert Cray session. Steve Jordan was producing. Yeah. And Nico was engineering. And I kind of experienced my first professional recording session. I had done little stuff back in DC, but this was like the real deal. And after the first day, I literally sat in the corner and didn't say anything and tried to be helpful where I could, but I really was just very intimidated at that point. And at the end of the first day, Nico's like, well, we're going to be at the studio for 3 weeks. Do you want to, kind of come hang and just help us out? And I was like, definitely, I'll be there, Mm-hmm. Still lived in Long Beach. So I had to figure out how I was going to do it, but I just said yes immediately. Yeah. I didn't even think about it. I was just like, yes, I will 100%, no problem. I'll figure it out. Yeah. So, I stayed in a couple hotels. I crashed on, I had a friend who lived in Santa Barbara. I just made it work for the 3 weeks, and I, was there and was as helpful as I could be to Nico. And at the end of the 3 weeks, Nico tolerated me, and he invited me to come visit him at Capitol, which is where he had a mix room. He didn't work for Capitol. He was just an independent engineer who had a mix room at Capitol. So at the end of the 3 weeks, we went back to LA, and I went to visit him at Capitol. And the first session he invited me to was a One Republic iTunes Originals session. Mm-hmm. It was in Studio B. It was at One Republic, the band, and a mini orchestra. It was like a huge session. So it was a totally different experience from like the blues rock that I'd just been doing with Robert Cray. But I got to experience that. I met everyone at Capitol. He kind of introduced me to everyone. And after that session, he invited me to be his assistant. You know, I don't want to say unpaid, but it was pretty much unpaid. He was just like, come help me when you can. And I was like, sure, I'll do it. So for the next like 6 months, I just kind of helped him wherever I could, came to all his sessions, organized his mix room, you know, file management, emptied his trash, whatever I needed to do for him, got food, you know, whatever. So that's how I kind of like got in the door. So I was here at Capitol every day in his mix room for 6 months. He introduced me to everyone in the studios, and then eventually a spot opened up as, you know, a setup. The entry-level jobs in the studio at Capitol are the setup positions, which is basically a combination of a runner, a, you know, person who sets up the big orchestra sessions, puts up all the mics, and, you know, takes care of the studios and stuff. So
working like,
but it's a full-time
banker's
job.
hours, right?
No. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, there's two shifts. There's the banker's shift, which is the veteran setup guys work the day shift, and then the newbies work the night shift. So you start at 5 p.m. and you work until 2 a.m. or whatever.
Yeah.
And that could change depending on the sessions. But so that's what I got hired, and that's how I got in the door. And then I did that for 2.5 years, and then they promoted me to a staff engineer. And that's where we are.
So it's
5 years
ironic
later.
that you're so you met Steve Jordan, which if you don't know who Steve Jordan is, Google him. He's he's produced several
he's
John Mayer records.
He's produced for John Mayer. He played for Eric Clapton, and he's worked with Keith Richards, and he's the real
He's
deal.
a killer drum. And this Neve here is his?
I believe he owns at least a part of this console that's in Studio D here at Capitol right now. And I didn't actually get to meet him until that Robert Cray session in person, but we had a mutual friend who kind of made the introduction. So he was really gracious and introduced me to Nico, who started my career.
That's cool. I've got a lot of respect for one of my favorite records of all time is the Continuum record, which he did for John Mayer.
Yeah.
It's just it's a piece of art to me. But anyway, that's cool. I didn't realize that there was a big studio in Santa Barbara.
It's not huge, but it's called Santa Barbara Sound.
I'm going there tomorrow. Maybe I'll crash it.
When I was there, Dom was the owner. I'm sure. I think he still is.
Yeah. So where's skipping a little bit? You said Nico has a studio now in Ventura.
Yeah, Nico set up a little mix room for himself up in Ventura.
So it's like in a house, or is it like a commercial thing?
Yeah, it's like it's not in his house, but it's like a rental space that he turned into a studio. It's got a view of the ocean.
That's nice.
Yeah, he's set up.
Yeah, that's cool. We were talking just before we turned the recorder on about the people who are difficult to work with and the people who are easy to work with, and we'll do the PG version. But you kind of reiterated something that I've always believed too, is that the more people aren't successful just because they're talented. It's way deeper than that. Most of those guys seem to have people skills. They know how to treat people.
Absolutely.
They're not divas, and the people who how did you put it? You worded it great.
The people who are a little bit difficult are the ones who have tasted success potentially, maybe a little bit of success, or haven't quite gotten there but are on the edge, on the fringe. Those are the ones who I guess feel like they have something to prove, and usually not all of them, but the ones that I have dealt with that have been difficult have usually been of that group.
Yeah. So true, man. Yeah. I mean, it's like, here's a great example. I mean, and we're not talking about household names here. We're talking about names that you and I would geek out over, or I would. He's probably a buddy of yours too, but Steve Genowick. The first time I ever worked here.
Yeah, he's really difficult to work with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, here's a great example of like, we've been talking at my church about ego and how you have this strength under control. And when the first time I ever worked here, I had done a full mix for like 10 songs in Pro Tools. and we were going to bring it to Capitol, put it out on one of the boards and run it through the chambers, listen to it on the monitors, and just kind of, put the finishing touches on it. And a guy named Steve called me and said, "Hey, I'll be your assistant on Monday when you come in. Tell me what you need, and I'll get you set up." And it was just I thought maybe this is a college student or something like that. I didn't know, And then when I got here, Steve, we met, and I said, "Hey, I've been thinking a lot about the vibe we're going for here." And this is honestly, I did not know this. I said, "I'm going for this Michael Bublé Christmas vibe because I think that's a great record." And this is except it won't be a solo vocal. It'll be a quartet vocal. It'll be 4 singers. And he said, "Okay, I think we can do that." By the way, I tracked 9 of those 11 songs. And I'm like, "What? Why aren't I assisting you?" But I mean, it's just like that. I mean, probably the day before he worked with Al Schmidt, and now he's working with me, but he doesn't treat us any differently. And I just have so much respect for people like that. And I know that you probably have not told me half of what you've had the opportunity to do. So I want to ask you now. Because you probably won't talk about this any other way, but so what's the coolest, like the thing you tell if your mom was a recording engineer, the thing you would tell your mom that you've done lately that she would be like, "Wow, you got to do that"? What's something you've done in the last year?
I mean, my favorite story from Capitol, I would tell my mom even though she's not a recording engineer, and she'd still geek out.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't even a staff engineer yet. I was just still on the setup team, and Paul McCartney booked Studio B, and I was kind of the setup person assigned to that session. So there was the assistant, the Capitol staff guy that was provided, and me, and it was kind of us two, and then the engineer, who was the first engineer recording, and I was just there hanging out in that session all day. And at the end of the session, there was like filming guys, there was managers, and just a ton of people all over the studio. And Paul. And he walked around and shook every single person's hand in the studio right before at the end of the session and said, "Thank you." And he came up to me, shook my hand, and said, "Thank you."
That's what we're talking about.
Looked me dead in the eye. I almost passed out.
Yeah, he's a freaking Beatle.
This is a Beatle. This is a freaking Beatle.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even engineering. I wasn't even second engineering. Yeah. I was a setup assistant on that session.
Yeah.
And it is my favorite memory from the studio.
Wow. Steve told me the story one time. He must be a heck of a guy because Steve was telling me that he was sick one time and he got a phone call from an unknown number or whatever, and it was this British voice on the other end. It was Paul McCartney just calling to check on him.
Yeah,
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah,
but I know he must be a really cool guy, but that's not unusual for somebody that does this sort of thing that we dream of on a daily basis. I mean, they're just nice guys usually, right? There's guys that do the same thing we do, except they never let their ego get the
Yeah.
Everybody lets their ego get the
a little bit. Yeah, you have to once in a while just to do it.
So Paul McCartney, you did a session for Paul McCartney. What?
I was a fly on the wall for a session for Paul McCartney. Let's back up a little bit.
Let's call it a session. You were in on a session.
I was in the same room as Paul McCartney that one time. Yes.
I haven't done that. What's something else? What's your distant second memory, greatest memory of engineering?
I mean, probably the other Beatle that is fortunately still with us. He comes through and has his birthday party at Capitol every year.
Really?
And yeah, Ringo. And I've been here for 5 years now, so I've experienced 5 Ringo birthday parties. So that's always a treat. He's also extremely nice. And it's just that kind of thing. It's like you never know who you're going to run into in the hallway at Capitol. I've now been in the hallway. I've walked past Bob Dylan, Neil Young, both living Beatles. I mean, Neil Diamond. Like, you just can't. It could be anybody,
Diana
Krall. Yeah.
Frank Sinatra.
His ghost. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I've had a few times, but and then you get a bunch of modern stuff too, and you see all these modern bands and pop people and hip hop stars coming through, and you're just like, It's just a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
That's really what the vibe. I just love the vibe.
So let's talk really quick about, this is something I have a lot of like up and coming engineers ask me this sort of thing, like how do you get into it? How do you get into this sort of thing? Now I know that the Capitol is it's like the Super Bowl of gigs. Any way you look at it, I mean, it's just
really
a great place to
I
be.
landed here.
There was a couple of places like that in Nashville. Nashville's closing studios left and right, but one of the things I always felt like was an important thing to do is to be at the right place at the right time. Yes. And if you don't know what the right time is, then be at the right place all the time.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
Yeah.
It's almost, my advice would be, you have to be ready to take any opportunity at any time. That's really what it was. I mean, it was so quick and so random when I took that gig with Nico. I had to drop everything I was, I had a couple job applications. I think I was about to start doing some live sound work. I had some other feelers, and I just let that all go because I just kind of had a gut feeling, and I just made myself available to Nico, and I worked my ass off for him. I really, I just tried really hard and made myself as available as possible, and pushed through it, because working for Nico was great. Then when I was on setup, I mean, the setup job here, it's basically a runner position. I mean, you're basically a gopher. It's the lowest, position in the studio, but it's the most important position in the studio, because everyone's relying on you. But it's tough. The hours are tough. It's physical labor when you're loading in for a big session, or there's a big film gig, or you got to lift up some stage for a showcase. It's a lot of work and a lot of really hard hours. So once I had the opportunity, obviously that's important to take whatever opportunity you can, but then you got to push through the hard times before before anything happens. And I still have crazy hours. And
there's something pretty. There's some gold in there. I think. I think if we can kind of put ourselves in the position of the guy sitting at home that's just trying to record his band, or the guy that's got he's finally got a little studio set up and he can cut drums in his garage or whatever. I have always thought that some guys may not have success doing that because they don't treat the worst singer, the worst band they've ever heard, like they're the most important person that's ever been in their studio.
Yes.
Because that's one of the things that I felt like I always did. It always kind of came natural for me. But, when somebody will ask me, hey, what are you working on that's really cool? And I'll say, I'm working on this Taylor's project right now, man. And, we just did 7 vocals at Capitol. It's great. And they sang great and all that kind of stuff. I kind of have this clouded vision of some of the other stuff that I've been working on, because what I'm working on right now is the most important thing that I've done in a long time, and I feel like probably sometimes a lot of runners and gophers and stuff feel like they're just going to phone this in, but when they get a decent job, they'll start doing the right thing. But that's too late then, right?
100%. That is brilliant advice. That's kind of how I saw it. The first piece of advice that I got from the mutual friend that introduced me to Steve and Nico, he called me up right before I entered the studio in Santa Barbara, and he's like, let me give you one piece of advice before you start the session. He said, no job is beneath you. And it's I've just taken that to heart, because Nico actually told me a story about the kid he hired before me, who was kind of went through the same exact, started with Nico, then got hired at Capitol, and is now moved on to be an engineer. Nico hired him because he was in the studio with 4 or 5 interns, and this kid emptied Nico's trash can without being asked. And Nico noticed that and was like, oh, well, if he did that, then he's going to do a whole lot more, and he's going to, so he just took that and I was like, wow, that's genius. It's no matter what you're doing, no matter what job you do it to the fullest of your ability all the time.
Because people notice the small stuff.
People 100% notice the small stuff, especially in studios, because the small stuff is what matters in studios. Whether the pencils are sharpened on the producer's desk, whether the console's clean, the trash is empty, the coils are the cables are coiled properly, the little details.
Whether you remember which mic they used last time.
Yes, all that little stuff matters.
Yeah, it's all
100%.
Yeah. That's good advice. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. Have you've of course been down to the chambers, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I got a sneak peek.
Musty and
The musty.
yeah, not ventilated properly, but they're really cool.
Still smells kind of wet.
Yes.
Has a stench of like mercury paint,
Maybe some asbestos.
lead paint, and some asbestos in there.
It's definitely.
But man, it sounds good, right?
Oh, it's the best sounding reverb
Yeah.
you can possibly.
So you
imagine.
said, okay, so not many people have had a chance to go down to the chambers. They don't let anybody go down there anymore,
Right. It's pretty hazardous getting down there.
It
It's
is. You have to. It's like being on a ship.
Concrete tube that you have to crawl down and avoid hitting your head.
You could fall to your death, but man, it would sound good. Right?
Exactly. Your body clanking down the hall would sound great.
Oh, so you said Universal Audio just came and sampled all of those chambers, right? Every one of them?
Well, they released 4 chambers. They did their measurements and calculated all their math stuff. And
so they don't take an IR?
I'm not exactly sure how they did it, honestly.
Is it how does it measure up?
It's great. It sounds amazing.
Really?
Yeah. I'm so impressed.
Really?
With, obviously there's something special to the real thing, but if you can't have the real thing, the plug-in is like, next level. I mean, it's I think it's the best sounding chamber emulation by far.
Well, these are the best sounding chambers I've ever heard.
So that makes sense.
So give us a little backstory on the chambers. Do you know any history about it?
Well, yeah. So the rumor is that they were built, designed by Les Paul when the studios were made in 1956. There are 8 of them. All have slightly different characteristics. All sound, slightly different. They're slightly different decay times. And Al Schmidt's favorite chamber is 4.
Which one did we use today?
We used 1, which I think 4 and 1 sound pretty similar. Mm-hmm. There are different mics in the chambers, which also kind of give them a different characteristic. I think there's a pair of 44s in chamber 6, RCA ribbon mics.
Really?
Which kind of it's a totally different sound than like the hi-fi,
the mics I noticed down there were like, weren't there some SM80, not SM81s, the Shure pencil mic,
SM80,
SM81s,
yeah,
but with an Omni capsule on it, right?
Yeah, they those are popular. I think those are in a couple, and then there's some Altex in each one
like
of the
a voice at
chambers.
the theater, like a speaker with a horn on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and they're just that's how that's how every chamber works, I believe, but.
So you were doing some stuff on the chamber. You were rolling off some.
Yeah, I've found that at least for a lot of stuff, EQing a little bit what you're sending to the chamber really matters, because you don't want a whole lot of that super low or even super high stuff kind of messing with this pure sounding pureness of the chamber. So I roll off a little bit of the low, kind of shelf a little bit of the high. Maybe boost something in there if it sounds good. But I've started doing that recently, where I kind of EQ the send to the chamber. Mm-hmm.
Just mainly filter stuff, or
mainly filter. I mean, you're pretty much doing the same thing you would do to clean up a vocal, but maybe a little less or more exaggerated, because it's good. It's going to reverberate around and sound really big, even if you take out a lot. Yeah. But again, it sounds good.
So. You said Al's favorite chamber's 4. What do you see most guys? I mean, there's an 80-20 rule to everything, right? I mean, 20% of the effort brings you 80% of the results. What do you see most people doing to the chambers? Is it orchestra stuff? Is it vocals? What is it?
Yeah, well, so the chamber, I mean, the way it's a physical thing, so it's a very specific sounding reverb. Mm-hmm. It takes up a lot of space, so most people use it to make orchestras sound bigger, puts it on, strings and horns and woodwinds and stuff like that. That's kind of the main thing, besides, vocal, piano stuff as well. But, I mean, again, this industry, this audio is all about experimenting. So I think you can pretty much try anything.
Yeah.
So
do any of the R&B, hip hop guys use the chamber, or is it kind of?
That's definitely not their go-to. Yeah. But who knows? Again, it's what sounds good. So maybe they can manipulate it somehow to make a cool effect sound and throw it in a produced track, or put it on a vocal and do something to it. I don't know. It's all.
Yeah. So you get to. I know you assist a lot of people and you make a lot of people who come in here like me make it an effortless couple of days. You seem to always know exactly what to do and everything. But are you do you first a lot too? I mean, are you got some stuff that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so most of the sessions I do are in this smaller Studio D at Capitol, which is more of a vocal production suite. So a lot of the time, the client doesn't bring an engineer, and I engineer, which is great. But I also love assisting because, you know, you learn so much when you assist. That's how I've learned everything. I mean, I went to school for it. I did the whole audio program, and I learned a good amount there. But I think most of my knowledge comes from watching and being an assistant to great engineers and learning what they do.
Well, here's one thing I want to learn. What do you have against the multi-tool?
Good question.
Every time I would sit down, it would be in grid mode and multi-tool.
Yep. I have just developed a workflow where I shortcut back and forth between the tools. I don't like having to put the cursor in a specific spot to do a specific thing.
And accidentally erase a region.
Exactly.
I did that a couple of times, and when I kept going back to it, I was going, okay, because I think people who are good at their craft are always students. They're always trying to learn something.
Absolutely. And I learn something new every day.
Always trying to learn something. So about the third time I sat down, I was going, there must be something to this. What is it? And then I started thinking, well, I mean, I work around my accidentally Control Z or Apple Z my way out of trouble sometimes, but you don't, because that tool's not on unless you need it, right?
Yeah, you could definitely look at it like that. I look at it more as, you know, it's also a very small piece of a larger workflow.
Yeah.
So you might not be able to take that and put it into your workflow. Mm-hmm. That might not work at all.
Yeah.
But everything else that I do around that, you know, the multi-tool doesn't work for me. But so I think it's more of a big landscape that you kind of have to build of your own workflow, and some things work, some things don't. And you know, I know a lot of people who use the multi-tool and love it. So
yeah.
Even though it's, you know, trash.
So what's one thing that you've learned lately that just like, wow, I just learned something really cool?
Good question. I'm sure I learned something in the past couple days we've been working together. Honestly,
I'm not talking about this session. I'm talking about you know, something. I mean, it could be like a miking technique. It could be like because being in the studio with singers is kind of like a psychology session. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you kind of have to, you know,
100%. Yeah,
you have to.
To speak on that, I was really, really impressed with Wayne, the producer, for the sessions in the past couple of days, and the way he guided the singer and the way he interacted with the singer and said just what he needed to at the right time and got the performance. And it was like art. It was really beautiful to watch. And so that's kind of what I've taken from the past few days, if, you know, among some other stuff more technical, but that was just really fun to watch him, you know, kind of feed him a harmony, you know, tell him just little things that he would pick out. I always find it impressive when a singer is stacking. Mm-hmm. So you have the lead vocal playing and you're singing over the lead. He can pick out a wrong note, and he knows which one it came from, which track it came from. And I'm just like, wow, that is an ear, you know. And you were doing the same thing. You were picking out little, you know, whether they did a run too fast or, and that's really, I don't know, that's what caught my ear this particular session. That's what I was really intrigued by. So.
Well, that's cool.
Well done.
Yeah, I learn something from Wayne all the time. He's a really good producer, and it seems like, you know, when you're producing vocals, which I do that some too, you're always running this fine line of like pushing them as hard as they can go, but not crashing anything.
Right.
You know?
It was weird. At the end of the day, they always seemed to be like just about done with singing for the day.
Yeah.
But it happened to be at the end of the session, so it was just like it was planned. It was perfect. It was like, you know, they did the perfect amount of singing for that day, and then they were done, and the project was done, and it's time to move on. It was really great.
So on a big project where, you know, there's money, like you were telling me about John Mayer came in and blocked out Studio B for how long?
He did a couple, stints of about 8 months. He was here for 2 big sessions and then a couple little more, a couple week sessions for to record The Search for Everything.
Recording which one?
The Search for Everything, which was his most recent full record, and he's released a couple singles since then that he's been doing elsewhere. But
so who engineered that?
So he has his own engineer that he travels with, Chad Franskowiak, who's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great engineer. And then just, whoever was on the schedule would assist them throughout the project.
Did you get to assist?
But yeah, towards the end. So he kind of moved in about 2 months after I started at Capitol. So it was almost like, I started at Capitol, then he moved in. For my entire time on the setup staff, that was basically, that whole session. And then literally, a month or so before they left and the record was done, I got promoted. So it was almost like that was my whole first couple years at Capitol was that session, which was really cool because I have a lot of respect for John Mayer. I think he's incredible.
Yeah, I love his music. Although I have to be honest, I haven't. After Continuum, I just to me, if somebody says go listen to your favorite John Mayer record, it's that one.
Of course, yeah. Well,
It's just a great record,
legendary record.
Yeah. Okay, so we've been chatting here for a little while. I don't want to
It's been great.
Belabor it too much, but I'm really enjoying chatting with you.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
so you said you were going to be working with an artist here pretty soon, where you're going to be accredited engineer, Haley Seinfeld.
Oh yeah. Haley I cut the vocal on a song that she just came out with last week called Afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great song.
Is it out yet?
Yeah, it's going to be the theme song. She's got a new TV show where she plays Emily Dickinson.
Oh, okay.
It's coming out on the new Apple streaming service.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, she came in. We recorded that towards the beginning of the year, and I didn't really know what the song was going to be, if it was going to be anything, and then it came out. It sounds great. So
it's cool.
Yeah, she's really good.
Who are just a couple last questions, just off the top of my head? Who's somebody that you're that if you hanging out here for long enough, you'll get to work with? Who is somebody that you're going like, dang, I really want to work with them?
Michael Bublé comes in frequently.
Really?
Steve usually engineers, but I've assisted a couple times, which has been really fun. I work with the DJ duo Disclosure. They come in a lot. They love this room. It's really fun to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always waiting for John to come back. I know he will at some point. It's been a while, but I'm excited for him to get back into Studio B.
Yeah. Well, man, thanks for chatting with me for a little while. I'll think of 100 questions after I leave, but
of course.
I'll call you back.
Great. Yeah, please do. Anytime.
Okay.